for me, I struggled for so many years between when I turned pro in 2012 and then I had to like take a few years off to like put muscle on, yes, but like my system was like crashed and bottomed out, just complete suppression of pituitary function and all of that. To then kind of going through the same thing again after I decided to do 3 pro shows and then being done. And so it's like, why, you know, why? And now I want to be able to help myself because I went to so many people, nobody could help me or no one
Mhm.
understood the things that I understood. And then I would read and research and then I'd try to ask people about it or get their opinion and nobody knew what I was talking about.
All right. Well, we're excited to have everybody on here today because we have a great guest, Casie Shepherd, joining us today. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate having you on.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, just kind of, I'd like to set up a little bit. So, saw some of your content online, first on LinkedIn, then Instagram. I definitely encourage people to check out your platforms, which obviously we'll have in the show notes and stuff. But, you know, just for those out there that maybe were first being introduced to you, I know we're going to unpack it and get into it today, but former D1 athlete, IFBB Women's Physique Pro. And I just really was kind of diving into a lot of your integrative health coaching. So I think it's really cool when you have someone who has like their own story and journey between athletics, some of their successes, some of their struggles, and then, you know, at a high level in the physique sport. So you definitely understand that. And then getting into kind of more the integrative health and root causes and stuff. So really, really cool. Excited to kind of dive into the details today and appreciate having you on.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
So I thought we could maybe start a little bit with just your journey. Where did you get interested in, or into all these fun fitness stuff in athletics, and kind of we can walk through some of that as far as where you landed, how you landed where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how far back do you want to go with it? It's the question.
Let's start at Colorado State. I'm interested maybe at that, unless there's a
Okay.
good factoid before that, but maybe
Yeah.
we could start there.
I mean, I would just say, like, we can get into the deeper stuff, but like I was driven to become an athlete or compete at a high level more to just become something with all like the stuff I went through as a kid. And that's really what like pushed me to become an athlete. And like basketball just happened to be it. I was a volleyball player, basketball. I did play some softball. And then when I start like being like, hey, I want to get recruited and get a Division I scholarship, I gave up softball because I had to miss some school to do traveling AAU ball,
Mhm.
just to get recruited. And so I ended up signing my junior year, kind of got recruited all over the country. So that was the intent. And I was just kind of like over the recruiting process. So I signed and was like, okay, just in case I get injured, I guess, we're good. So, but yeah, I was recruited. My top 3 were University of San Diego, Colorado State, and then Boston University. So like
Okay.
complete different
Opposite
ends of the
ends.
country. But I 100% knew that I wanted to leave Minnesota, where I grew up. I wanted to move away from home. I wanted to have that experience. I wanted to go to a bigger school in Minnesota. It was like the U of M, and that was it. And even the best players in Minnesota rolled the bench for 3 years and played for a year. And I was like, yeah, I don't want that. Um, so I like, just kind of, I loved Colorado because it was still kind of close enough to be able to have family come visit, not so far where it'd be harder to get home. So, and then I just came on a visit out there, or went on a visit out there and was like, okay, I love this.
It's so beautiful out there, right? It's
Yeah.
just, yeah, just being out there a few times myself. It's just such a yeah, just breathtaking views and the whole deal. And obviously, you know, a little different than Minnesota, I would imagine.
Yeah. But like the perfect balance, like
Sure.
San Diego is gorgeous, but it was a private school. I did not have great, what was it, ACT scores or whatever we had to take back then. I was not like a studious student. I really just wanted to play basketball. I did not know what I wanted to do yet. I wanted to go to a bigger school. They didn't even have a football team at the time, I don't think. And like Boston was so city, and like I was from a suburb, so to me it was just like a little scary at the time. So like I think Colorado was kind of just that similar vibe. So the Four Seasons, but it was always sunny. And then we had the mountains, and I'm like, I don't hike or ski or any of that stuff, but it was just, I don't know, I went out there and like the team was great and just like the vibe, and it was a big school. The arena was awesome. And I think that's kind of like what sold me on it.
I will say, preparing for the podcast a little bit, I was like, oh, that makes sense, because you had an Instagram post, I think, where you know, you were jumping, and I was like, holy moly, she's got some hops. So,
I
so
don't even
yeah,
know I don't even know where those are still from. I still feel like way slower than I used to be, but I mean, I don't think I had as much muscle back then either. So it's a little
yeah,
different.
there you go.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit in the opening there just about like the, you know, the drive, and I've been fortunate to talk to, you know, a couple different uh, high level performers like yourself turning pro. I had a friend that was a Olympian for wrestling on, and just kind of, I'm always curious to hear a little bit of the story of like what motivated you early in life to have that type of drive, because as you know, you experience it, a lot of the audience out there knows, I'm sure, that it just takes a different level of focus and discipline. Even if someone has some great genetic potential, they just really have to
Yeah.
apply themselves. So where did that come from?
I mean, I think there's several different deep dive things, but I was always like kind of a taller kid, and they knew I would be tall just because I think they look at your growth plates and all of that. But I was on a lot of medication for Tourette's, anxiety, OCD, depression, having a lot of tics as a kid, and just feeling like overstimulated constantly, and then being put on medication. It actually, to what I believe with research at this point, suppressed some pituitary function at that time, which delayed puberty.
Mm,
So I didn't even, I pulled myself off medication in like between ninth, like kind of in ninth grade, and then hit like a 6-inch growth spurt between ninth and 10th grade. So I was like starting on the B squad in ninth grade, like not great. That summer I came off medication, I hit my growth spurt. I made a bet with my dad that if I got a college scholarship, he'd buy me a car. And
nice.
this goes kind of deep, but my dad had a hard time with me as a kid, and so we didn't emotionally, to what I feel, connect well. And so I think like sports gave him something to connect to me on, and so I think I always sort of searched for his approval in certain ways, and it was like one of those things when he challenged me that I was like, I'm gonna do this, and like whatever. And then I just was in the gym 24/7. After games, I go to the gym, I go shoot. I was like obsessed. So
Yeah.
I just got really good. And then I hit puberty and kind of had a lot of asthma issues at the time, which now I know is inflammation with histamine, and puberty with hormones and all these different things mixing after being on medication and all that stuff. So um, it was kind of like one thing would end, but then another thing would trigger. And that's kind of how it went through college sports and then going into competing and then being done with competing. It was like each thing taught me something, but then something else would pop up that I then had to deal with. It was like a very long, drawn out process of like figuring out what the heck was going on with my body.
Yeah, it just as you're talking through that, I mean, it's so I have a 10 and 12-year-old daughter, and it's I think a couple thoughts I had was, one is I'm always trying to not pressure them too much with sport and like put too much there, but also, you know, their mom and myself have coached for many years, and so it's kind of like that fine line of, hey, and so I just often will tell them, like, if you want the resources and you want to get after it, we'll provide them, we'll help you, we'll do their thing.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to my 10-year-old's soccer coach. I said, yeah, I've done graduate studies in like human performance and kinesiology, but my daughter thinks I know nothing about showing her
Right.
drills of like agility. I'm like, so, you know, I'm dad. So I just try to like drop her little hints, like, do you want to go to the park and work on some stuff? Or if
Right.
she's asking, but it's definitely a fine balance. But I like the college car thing, because that might be some kind of thing I can kind of put out there for them to,
Well, and here's the like sort of messed up part about all that is like for me, it's not that like my parents push me, because I think your kids need like a push and to get excited or whatever. Like they need to learn some of that discipline as well. It was that like I didn't have an emotional connection with him, that I almost felt disassociated from his presence unless I was performing or proving myself or earning that affection. And so for me, I think that became the issue and driver of like being successful at whatever I was doing and trying to earn that like love in some sort of way. So like, I do think if you're like a very loving and nurturing parent, you're giving that to your kids no matter what, that it becomes one of those things where it's like, hey, my dad was hard on me, but then I like learned that I could like push myself beyond. He didn't reject me if I couldn't do it, but like he was supportive and still loving no matter what. So
Yeah, it's definitely like you said, a little bit of a balancer between the challenge and stuff. And it's fun watching them, but and then there's other times where like one daughter likes a sport because we're friends, but she's not very competitive, and that's tough sometimes. But then
right.
but then there's other stuff that she enjoys. So you just kind of let them land where they are, But I I am curious, as you were kind of progressing through. I was doing some reading on this and just wanted to either confirm or kind of unpack some of it. Like when you were in college competing, were there some different health issues that started to come up at that point, or was it prior or after? What was the timeline like?
Yeah. I mean, like from the time I was in high school and I hit puberty, there was like underlying stuff. And then I'm like performing at a high level, being a college athlete. After my freshman year, we brought in a new coach because the coach that recruited me got let go, which he's basically fired, but he like left, and they brought in a new coach, and I played for her for a year. And she was awful. It was just absolutely like depressing, like not a great time. And that same year, I don't know, I got sick at some point. It was just like an ear infection. I don't even remember what started it, but I went on a round of antibiotics, and then it like trickled, and it was like double pink eye, asthmatic bronchitis, double ear infection. And like, she was like making me travel with the team because she didn't want other teams to strategize, because I'd started like a good number of games at that point. And like, my body was just like, could not recover. I was so stressed and whatever. And I got to the end of the season, and like, she was just awful and pinning people against each other to try to motivate them. And it was just like not the right vibe. And I was just so burnt out and unhappy at the end of the season. And she wanted me to come back. She let like 5 or 6 girls from the team go, because people think you sign a 4-year scholarship and it's like a given, and that's not the case. Like, you're resigning every year, and if some coach comes in,
Right.
they don't want you there, like, see ya.
Bye-bye.
But so she wanted me to come back, and I was like, I'm going to give up my full ride scholarship, or I'm going to come back. And I was like, I'm so unhappy. Like, I don't even care. And I had decided to redshirt my freshman year. They gave me the option. There was like 4 or 5 people ahead of me. They're like, hey, if you want to do a 5th year, like come in and get stronger, get faster, have a 5th year. And I was like, great. So I'd already redshirted a year. And at that point, you couldn't just transfer to another school without like redshirting again. So I was like, I'm not doing that. So I was like, I'm over it.
Right.
And I quit. Then I just became a normal student for 2 years, paid out of state tuition. My dad sold the car, even though I took the loans out. So he punished me for not playing anymore. But it was, it was kind of fun to have a different side of college life as well, because you're not actually getting paid that much to be a full-time college athlete. And it really is what like started my fueling and passion for the nutrition side, because after all those antibiotics and stuff, I started having all these gut issues, some food sensitivities. And so that's kind of like where I started my research and getting into the nutrition stuff, and went way too hard with it, and like got skinny, and like, but then I was in the gym, and I'm like, what do I do now? And that's where I started to channel a lot of my, like, I want to work for something. And I'm kind of loving how my body feels now with learning some of the nutrition side and working out on my own. And then that's when I ended up doing my first show, my senior year of graduating semester of college. And then I was on like the 18 credits a semester plan to just get done in 4 years after I took it easy the first year. So I was doing a lot. But yeah, it just fell in. I knew some people at the rec center that were like, hey, you should do a show. Like, you've got some good muscle. Like, and I didn't really know what I was doing. So that was like 2008 was my first show in college. And then there was 3 of us, and I did awful. Like, I did not know what I was doing. I had like just a regular Mystic spray tan on, and everyone else was like 10 shades darker than me.
Right. Yeah.
Some girl was like, oh no, those tans look awful. Just do this tan. It looks much better. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, it does look better. And so I like was, just unprepared. But then I just felt so awful after that show. Like I felt like a failure. And then I just kind of got like obsessed with it that way. And it was just stupid ego things back then, you know? And so then I moved home because I was like, I don't even know what I want to do with my life yet. And I just paid out of state tuition for 2 years and I'm broke. So I just moved home and became a trainer and just kept working out and doing shows.
It's interesting though, because I think a lot of people see the end result. They see the, you know, the Physique Pro, the you know, peak images and all that, but they don't know the journey because like I competed in the early 2000s and from when I was 18 till like 23, I
Okay.
want to say. And then later I had the bright idea where a friend of mine, I sent him some pictures and he's a pretty well-known like bodybuilding coach, whatever. He's been doing it for a long, long time. And I was like, hey, what do you think? I might want to do an old man show, you know, when I was 39. And he's like,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to do it in a couple of years. And he said, no, do one now. So I did that and checked the box and
That wasn't very hard to talk you into, obviously.
yeah, because I sent pictures like, you need to do one now. I'm like, oh, geez. But yeah, it's definitely, you know, especially when it's your first one or two, you definitely need a good coach. You definitely need someone who knows what they're doing because like you said, from the nuances of, you know, not only the diet and stuff, but the all the preparation that goes in with the tan and the posing
Yeah.
and the whole deal. And I think a lot of people just see the end result and think it's so easy to do that. But I do feel like people who've gone through that extreme of a journey, let's call it what it is, when you're that low body fat, it's not generally healthy, but you can still know how to go to that extreme. And then I think you can dial it back when you're coaching like general population and people. So I think it does give like that unique
Yeah.
insights to how the body works. I mean, is that what you experience now when you're coaching, just having that kind of background to pull from to when you're applying
Yeah.
that to your protocols and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, every show is so different, especially when I was like 22 doing my first show. It was like, I don't feel like I was like killing myself to get there, but I was like doing so many credits and doing school. And I had a boyfriend that lived down in Denver and I had a dog and I had a cat. And it was like my life was so chaotic. Then I graduated school, then the show was done. Then there was no structure anymore. And then I didn't have a job. I was moving home and it was like my life crashed. And then I had like the post like rebound 30 pounds because I couldn't like control myself anymore.
Oh
And then,
yeah.
you know, so it's like, but it was, you know, it was just because I was unaware to have anyone to like be like, hey, we have to taper you down, or to be like even just mentally aware of how that process goes. And so it was sort of like I gained a ton of weight and then I would just do another show. And so it was like the stress cycle, and that just obviously throws your system in a whole different direction. But I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't understand the internal stuff yet. So it took a long time to get out of that cycle and actually learn more. But I think, yeah, through all of that, which is why I started getting into more the hormone side of things, because I never responded the way that other people did. And I always had a very sensitive system. I think a lot of it just had to
Mm,
do with my, you know, growing up and being on medication and just different imbalances that I had underlying and gut issues and stuff. But it's what caused me and forced me to dive deeper and understand why things were happening. And I don't think people really do that unless they're forced to. And they might learn something, but they're never going to
right.
get deep enough with it to really understand all of it. And so I think that is why it led me there. And I think in a way, like competing for me was because I always didn't feel like completely balanced in certain ways, or like my system was responding the way it should. Like I always knew something was kind of off, even though I was an amazing athlete, or even though I pushed myself. I feel that I just have that much of a resilience and a discipline that I might have been running at like 70 or 60% capacity compared to most people and still got myself there. Because with what I know now, I'm like, yeah, I definitely didn't have like any of this going on
Right.
back then. So it kind of forced me in that direction. But I think for a long time too, like when you first start coaching people, you're like trying to do everything the same as what you did.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of coaches now that do that. And so like you get mad about it, but you're like, hey, I did the same thing, you
Yeah.
know?
Or the other one I like is the coaches out there that treat women like little men. It's like this is a whole different thing. That's you
Yeah.
know, and there's a lot of issues that can come out of that. But I think the one thing I did want to point out, though, I think that's a really good approach. I know we're going to get into some of the details shortly here as far as like root cause and kind of how your protocols and programs work and such. I want to definitely unpack that. But a lot of successful physique athletes, whether it's bodybuilding, physique, figure fitness, whatever, they kind of rest on that, the way they look. And so I think it's really unique that you didn't just use that as your billboard, if you will. You kind of really dived into understanding more detail and depth, root cause, things like that, because you don't see it a lot in the physique sport arena or coaches that come out of that space.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good thing for that you dove into that. And I think it also, like I said, adds kind of that unique advantage if someone's working with you to have that dynamic to look at both of those things.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, and I don't work with competitors anymore. I had a couple of them up until a few years ago. And there's like one or two where I'm like, if you decided to do one again, like I'd likely not want you to work with somebody else because I know your body so well and it would just be easy for me to prep you for it. And I want you to stay safe while you're doing it and all the work that we've done together. But I don't take anyone on because they just honestly like don't have a passion for it and don't love being in that environment anymore because of what I know now. It just like, it's too important for me to just want to do that with people. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think like I was looking, just one of the things I wanted to dive into a little bit is, there's that the old saying out there is like, test, don't guess. Right. And I think one of the things that in your messaging, what I've seen is you're a big fan of like comprehensive testing, and really diving into that. And I'm just, can you unpack for the audience out there, just maybe a little bit of the difference between like, hey, this is your standard physical and just general testing you're going to get from your GP or general practitioner. And then here's kind of when you're talking about advanced diagnostics, like what does that mean to you? And what do you like to look at in that?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard because it's one of those things, and I know you know this, but it's like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Right.
And so even back when I was only doing blood work for hormone testing, I thought like I was like doing the most, And so then the more I learned, the more I work with people and the more I would dive in and whatever, I'm like, no wonder some of these people don't respond super well or aren't doing well. You think like, oh, they're just stressed or there's, but it goes so deep. And so that's what like I get obsessed with things, but now I get obsessed about learning the body because I want to be the one to figure stuff out for people. Sometimes it's ego, but I won't do it in a way that pushes or forces. It's just like my goal is to educate people on why, because I think it's for me, I struggled for so many years between when I turned pro in 2012 and then I had to like take a few years off to like put muscle on. Yes. But like my system was like crashed and bottomed out, just complete suppression of pituitary function and all of that. To then kind of going through the same thing again after I decided to do 3 pro shows and then being done. And so it's like, why, why? And now I want to be able to help myself because I went to so many people, nobody could help me or nobody understood the things that I understood. And then I would read and research and I'd try to ask people about it or get their opinion and nobody knew what I was talking about, and it's like, there is a reason and this is a thing. And so why? And I think that just took me so long to continue to learn and to continue to put those pieces together and keep going deeper. And it's fun. It's actually like fun if you can grasp it and you learn it and the more you're doing. And so I wanted to be able to do that for other people because it was like so awful to be in that position where you just felt hopeless. And I am willing to be so disciplined and to put the money down into whatever, but like I can't find anyone to help. And like now everyone's a hormone coach or whatever, but there wasn't any of that back then. There wasn't programs for people to learn I've never taken a hormone certification, whatever. I've done all my own research, but now there's at least people out there who are teaching other people how to do it or who have at least a better understanding. It was just harder to find help back then. And so I think everyone learns their niche with it. And there is a specialty to be had, even people who say comprehensive testing, there's different levels to that additionally.
Yeah. But I think, one of the things too, that I've noticed, at least even with a lot of the physicians I talk to is, there's not a formalized training in school for it. So although they're good docs, their heart's in the right place. When they're getting introduced to like Dutch testing and metabolites of hormones or gut health, the GI maps, permeability testing, things of that nature, food sensitivities, they really have to, as you mentioned earlier, you really have to have a passion for it because it's tough. It's hard to interpret those things. And there's a lot of big words, a lot of interplay between different things. And there's so many protocols out there that I think, that's a nice barrier. But when you break through that barrier, it's really a unique approach that you can offer to clients and then give them that success with that. So with that, are there any things that you see in your testing that you kind of lean towards more? I mean, obviously there's nuance in individual approaches, but generally, what type of testing do you like to first draw up with someone? Are there certain markers if it's blood work? Do you go gut health, food? Where do you usually start with somebody?
Yeah, I mean, I just would have these like set packages for a while that, like these are your couple options. Now I'm doing more like customized whatever. So I like to do kind of like an initial call with somebody and be like, what's going on? Go through symptomology, go through health history, go through whatever. And it takes longer, but I'm like, not everyone wants to come to you and pay for 6 different kinds of lab reports, because is that the ideal situation? Yes. But it's like, is it necessary off the bat for everybody? No. But like, I also want you to understand, if you don't do some of this testing, what we could potentially be missing and how that could take longer for you to get to a state of healing. And it obviously depends on what it is. But if it's somebody who's very ill, because I do work with some very ill people, then it's like, this is your only option. I don't feel comfortable doing less than this at this point, if we really want to get to the bottom of what it is, because there is an order of importance when it comes to certain things. Hormones sometimes are at the top. Hormones are sometimes last, and you can shift somebody's entire body by putting them on something in a positive way, or you can throw it off negatively, and their body has to be primed and ready for that. And so it depends on what's going on. So like, that's why I'm like, hey, like, we have to do all this, and then we decide which direction we're going through and how we're going to go through this. But if it's something basic from somebody, we might only do a couple different tests, but it just depends on like, I don't know, where are you, like, are you obese, or are you like in actually good shape? You just feel like crap, or, what is it that you're going through? But yeah, I typically have like a set blood panel for a man and a woman that I like to see off the bat, that's a little more comprehensive. And then I'll have some specialty add-on stuff that I'll put on there if I'm like, okay, like we need to make sure that this is here or not. But I also do the Dutch testing, and we know that that's an entirely different way to look at it. And a lot of that plays a huge role if there are other gut issues, or if you're going to put someone on hormone replacement, and especially as a woman, and she's not responding well, or she's not primed for it, or she's been overweight for a long time prior to getting on hormone replacement. Like, is she going to utilize these hormones well, or is it going to drive up her insulin or her, whatever the case is. And so it sucks, because you kind of want to do so much with people, but they don't even have any idea that like this is a huge investment for them, but like it will save them a lot of time if they can just maybe commit to doing something like that off the bat, because you're going to give a more refined approach. Now, not everybody who reads those tests knows exactly what that means and how to cater it around that, or to turn a client away to say, you need to do this first before we're going to do it, then just have them go somewhere else and do it anyways, which fine. They always come back around when it doesn't work for them. But I think that's kind of hard too, but I think you get confident enough in the way that you're looking at things and how you're educating people that they're like, I believe that you know what you're talking about, and you just told me why, and I see the value in that. And by the time they come to talk to you about all the things they have going on, it's kind of like they're like, I need to do whatever I need to do at this point to feel better, and they're willing to walk through the process. So, those are the kind of clients that you want to come to you.
No, I mean, there's a couple examples that pop in my mind, and I'd like to hear some of yours, but a few, like, and I think it's important too for people to understand or to process, right? Like a little bit. So I'll give you one example. I've talked about it a few times on the podcast, but I had a few family members, women in my family, that were working with a brilliant physician in this field. It was a little less, I would say, functional medicine, maybe a little more hormone replacement. Like, I think there's
Okay.
some nuanced differences there, but I was shocked because one of them was like had low estrogen production in their blood work, but estrogen dominance symptomology. And then when they were on started some replacement, it just got worse, like really, really bad. I was like, what is going on? And then through some conferences I was at, and this is probably, I want to say it was 6 years ago. So I don't even know if precision analytics was that well known at the time, but there's a little booth and it was Dutch testing. And I was like, let me dive into this. And it was really cool because cool, but not right. It's like, good news, you didn't waste your money. Bad news, you have some serious problems we have to fix. So it's kind of like that double-edged sword where like when people buy more advanced testing or sign up for it, you're kind of hoping you find something so you can fix it, right? So they
Yeah.
don't have that emptiness feeling. But nonetheless, we did find some methylation issues that it's like, well, no wonder, like you can't take anything because the way the body was metabolizing those things just was not proficient enough to where there's a lot of backup. And I use this analogy probably 17 different times, but the analogy, the best way I could describe it is like with the estrogen production, if the faucet was barely on, you're still eventually, and the sink's clogged, eventually you're still going to overflow the sink. And so
They'll
that's
clean up.
kind of
Yeah.
essentially what was happening until we had phase 2 and then eventually phase 3 methylation. We looked at how the clearing, and so I think if you're out there and you're listening and it's like, I don't even know what the hell they're talking about, it's set up a consult, go through it with someone like Casie so that they can kind of explain it. But it's definitely a game changer as far as your protocol and your approach, because if you don't fix the body's ability to use what you're going to put into it to help it, it's
Yeah.
a train wreck.
Yeah.
And I think in the same sense with like gut health testing, I've seen there's so many, and I'm going to assume the best and say they're well-intended influencers and very, very brilliant marketers out there that are marketing probably some pretty effective products for many people. However, if you put a probiotic that you already have a high level of that bacteria in your gut microbiome, then you're just wasting it, or maybe even causing more of a dysbiosis in the balance in
Yeah.
your gut health. So it's actually like you're paying $100 a month for this super probiotic, but like
Yeah.
you're causing more issues. And I'm just curious, that's been some of my experiences. Like, do
Yep.
you have any stories or examples of something that you've seen when a client comes in where it's like, yeah, you got to pay $500-600, but I'm saving you $150 a month for the rest of your life. So it's
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah. Or like they're taking a probiotic that's not a high enough strain for what they need, or they need to come off of it, and because they're over fermenting in the gut, and they're the people that don't do well on fermented foods or fibers or prebiotics because their body's taking it and like feeding the bad stuff in their gut. And a lot of these people have some pancreatic issues, and so they can't properly break down glucose well, and so then they're like, it's like they're making wine in their stomach, it's like just causing a lot of bloating. And so it depends on what area of the gut it starts, but if there is that issue, then there's usually some digestive dysfunction, whether it's stomach acid production, bile flow, pancreatic enzymes. There's always going to be some sort of overgrowth in the gut that's like feeding and overproducing certain gases, butyrate, acetate, like they produce gases that then lead to food sensitivities, leaky gut, intestinal permeability issues. So it's why and there's different kinds of gut tests out there. I don't like
sure.
the gut zoomer because it's not quantifiable data. It's like hey, we found it in there, but we can't tell you exactly how much. And it's like, how do we know if we should treat this or how much we should treat it or what's more important? Like, to me, it's not as justifiable. And a lot of people, even so, like, as I'll do the GI map by Diagnostic Solutions, but to me, people have had bad luck with that only because they've had somebody who hasn't properly brought them through that or understands order of importance when it comes to some of that stuff, or they'll see some low commensal bacteria, like these healthy gut, whatever, but they have certain strains of elevated bacteria with low pancreatic function. And they think, oh, I'm going to put these people on high dose probiotics. And it's like, not when they're over fermenting and they have this, because now you're directly feeding these bacterial overgrowths. Like, this is not the first step of what you would do with somebody like this in this situation. And so then when that becomes beneficial is like how we were talking about with the hormone stuff and gut
Right.
methylation issues with hormones and stuff. A lot of the hormone stuff with the methylation and the detoxification starts in the gut. If they don't have proper bile flow and they can't clear it, their liver is congested, you know, whatever the case is, there's a enzyme called beta glucuronidase,
Mhm.
and it's produced in the liver and it's recirculating hormones. And so like that's an issue. And if you have that, it's like, okay, you could have low estrogen, but you're like recirculating all these, you know what I mean? You can't get rid of it. And so it's like,
Right.
it's not even really a hormone issue as much as it is like a gut issue.
Yeah.
But the methylation stuff is way more recently. I've gotten into more of that stuff, and it happens on several different levels in the system. And I even see it in the hair analysis testing I'm doing with the heavy metals.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, it's just, it's wild the amount of issues that that causes in people.
Yeah, and I'm curious too, have you, if there's a specific testing, like, and just for those that don't know out there, there's like different variations of like Dutch Complete, or there's like one of the ones I found a lot of utility in was, and again, it's difficult because it's also about compliance, but was like cycle mapping. I'm curious, have you ever used the cycle mapping approach, or do you stick more like Dutch Complete? Like, what do you like to use? I mean, all of them are beneficial. Just kind of curious in
I
your thoughts.
have it. I haven't even done a lot of Dutch stuff until more recently. Like I've
Mhm.
read a lot of them. But for me, it was just like continuing to add on more and more of the accounts. And I've found doing the Dutch testing a lot more recently, adding it into everything else I'm already doing with people just to kind of give that last level. Typically, before I do the blood work in the Dutch, I'm going to work more on the gut health and the hydration and the hair analysis and heavy metal side. Um, if they don't want to spend the money, I'm going to do that first
Sure.
because they're going to clear a lot of their nutritional stuff and the cells are going to be working better. And that's what I preach is like everything starts in the cell. It's a cellular function issue. And if your cells can't move properly and they aren't hydrated and they're not functioning well, like you're going to have a hard time moving everything else. And so I think that's like one of my main things. But yeah, the Dutch Complete, I can do DNA tests. I don't run any specific ones for people. I think it's something I'll likely start adding in very soon, just to get like a more specific things, but I will use certain methylations because some of them aren't bad to put people on regardless of if you know that they work with or not, but I will see a change in methylcobalamin or the homocysteine levels. I see the hormones change when I use certain things. And so like even without running specific genetic testing, there's a lot of stuff that you can like shift.
Yeah, so many questions going through my mind. So you're going to have to, I apologize in advance to you and the viewer if I bounce around a little too
No,
much,
that's
but
okay.
selfishly, I just want to dive into everything.
Yeah.
So
I
I'm
think it's
curious.
fun. I don't care.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm curious, and again, there's a lot of nuance for everybody out there. You're not prescribing. It's not like a cookie cutter approach, but I am curious, just high level. Can you unpack first hydration? How do you monitor that? Are there any tips? Is there any symptoms? Just kind
Yeah.
of walk us through your approach there.
Yeah. It's the more I learn about minerals, the more crazy it gets. So like the hair tissue mineral analysis is similar to like doing blood work versus doing a Dutch test,
Mm,
where you're doing a blood work for minerals, where you're seeing calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, whatever. Your blood will always prioritize mineral balance because it's what's like keeping you alive. But the tissues and what's absorbing the cells is a whole different story. And you can get minerals that build up and they accumulate in the tissues. And that is what drives glandular function in our body. And so the organs of our body start to activate thyroid, parathyroid, adrenals, pituitary, ovaries. And so it's the tissue cells that are driving that. And so if you have major imbalances within that, you will see people's actual personality patterns, energy patterns
mm,
in the hair analysis testing for what's on a cellular level. But what gets confusing is like if you like calcium and magnesium, everyone's like, oh, take that before bed. Everyone's burning through magnesium at such a high rate. Like everyone's taking magnesium and everyone's pushing mag glycinate, whatever. But a lot of people who have really like suppressed slow thyroid levels, like really low and slow, tend to accumulate magnesium and calcium more in the tissues.
Mm.
And it drives down their sodium potassium level. And if you think about sodium potassium is like, it brings blood pressure up. It's an energetic minerals. And so they start driving sodium potassium down and accumulating more calcium, magnesium. And actually, if you get past a certain level of that, it can activate certain pathways in your system where you almost feel like anxiety
Ah,
and activate that. And so people think, I can't calm down, I can't go to sleep, I don't sleep well, but it's like over activating certain chemicals in the brain. And then the more that sort of gap widens, the more they push. Minerals work synergistically and antagonistically. So if you're super high in sodium, it's going to drive your potassium down. If you're super high in calcium, your potassium is going to go down. And so people get stuck in these mineral patterns that then continue to drive glandular dysfunction over and over again. And so you think about being on a medication when you're younger for anxiety, what are
mhm.
you doing? You're suppressing certain parts of your dopamine and your serotonin to lower stress response. What happens when you do that? You stop retaining and absorbing certain minerals in the body that then drives other functions. So you can actually slow your thyroid down, slow your adrenal response, slow your recovery, slow your hydration. And so it's just wild to me that something so simple creates these patterns. And it's why, as a child, being on a certain medication, or as adult, you do one thing and now suddenly you have 15 other problems from one thing. And the wider those gaps happen, the harder you're stuck in that cycle.
Yes.
And, sodium, potassium work together in the cell. That's what hydrates. So I often see high sodium and very low potassium. These are the people who are peeing all day long and they can't stay
Mm.
hydrated. They're not hydrating in the cell. It's just going through. You need both of those to hydrate. And that's like the main of your entire body. And that's why people are like, oh, you have to stay hydrated. It's the most important thing. Well, it is, but it's not just about drinking water either. And so it's like you put people on some potassium and they're like, night and day. They feel better. Their thyroid function starts to come up. They're carrying their cells. They can detoxify better. Their liver's functioning. Their bowel movements go back to normal. And it just starts to bring that down. And then you have to address everything else additionally. But that's such a core function. But just because someone's magnesium is super high in the tissue doesn't mean that they're taking a bunch of magnesium. It could just mean that they're retaining a ton of it in their body too. And so there's different reasons why that happens from a digestive function, or if they have now heavy metals in the tissues. So again, it's how you read that in conjunction with the gut test, in conjunction with the hormones, and in kind of putting it all together. And that's what makes the comprehensive testing that much more accurate, when you know how to read what is doing what, and what can I do first that will then carry over into all these things, where we're not then overcompensating and throwing someone into another direction. And it's not easy and it's complicated and it can be stressful for everybody, but it makes looking at someone's symptoms in their body and their pattern that much more efficient, instead of just saying like, but again, like, even though people don't do all this testing, you guys or other people who do hormone replacement will have those people where they put someone on a hormone that they're so severely lacking in that it does shift everything else. And that's why it can be very successful to do that with people, because low dopamine, low, whatever, from, let's say, men's testosterone replacement, whatever. It's like, yeah, let's get people better fast. And if they're that low, it's going to change their life, and it will shift the way they start retaining minerals, and it will shift the way their digestion is. And there's a lot of those issues. So I think that's why I call myself integrative health, because you take the best of Western medicine and science and you incorporate it with the best of the internal and holistic stuff. We're not just going to put people on herbs all day
Right.
long and think that, like, oh yeah, this is going to do everything, and if we put you on 15 different natural things, that you're going to get better. And it's like, no, it doesn't really work like that either. um and and so, like, I love both sides, and it's been fun because I kind of used to be against all the medication stuff, and then as I've learned more, it's like, hey, you can actually do really cool stuff with this medication if you're using like a smaller dose, or like the right amount, or whatever with people. You just have to understand the science of it and not
Mhm.
like follow the jargon of what everyone else is talking about with it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this definitely, it was like a seminar right there. It was awesome. Walking through the details and how the nuances and how they all work. So I definitely appreciate that. And that's one of the philosophies that we try to have is, minimum effective dose, or like we'll get people that come in and say, you know, I want to get on a GLP-1. I want to get on testosterone. I want to get on a thing, like
Yeah.
here's the thing that I want that's going to solve it. And that's very, I get it. Like, I don't blame them. That's very, American of us in our culture, right? Where
Yeah.
we're just like, what's the thing to fix this? And it's like, hold on, before you even open your wallet at all, like send us your blood work, send us like, we got like, let's unpack this, walk through your testing.
Yeah.
So, cause I think a couple things I did want to go back a little bit, because I think you made some great points in there. But one of the things that people may not know that are listening to this, and again, just for everybody out there, this is not prescribing or cookie cutter. There's nuance to everything. However, what are some common, when you say heavy metals, what are some common heavy metals you've seen, or maybe some recent ones you've seen that are high in
Yeah.
people that maybe they don't know? And then can you talk a little bit about maybe the symptoms they could be experiencing? So if someone's like, hey, I'm gonna reach out to Casie and check this out. Like, what?
Yeah.
Because I am feeling this way. Like, what? Can you give some examples of that?
Yeah. I'll first say that I don't think it's something that you'll always feel, but if
Mm,
there's issues in the mineral profile, which usually there will be if there's other stuff going on, um, people don't know that if you are really low in certain minerals, you will accumulate heavy metals as a way to fill like the cellular function. There are like certain heavy metals that associate with certain minerals. So they're like, let's say magnesium is doing 100% of its job at a cellular level and you're really low in magnesium. I don't even remember which heavy metal it is that would fill that cellular receptor, but it might do like 25% of the job of what magnesium could do.
mm,
And it's not doing as good of a job, but your body's actually trying to help it by accumulating those metals to fill the role as much as it possibly can. And so if you have long-term deficiencies in specific minerals, you're accumulating heavy metals, for survival. And so it can be easy to accumulate more heavy metals because we're all exposed to a lot of heavy metals, tap water products could be a lot of different things. If your body's in a good hydrated, balanced state, you don't really absorb them as much unless you're getting exposed to like higher doses amounts more often. And so that's kind of the first thing that I think is interesting for people to know is, um, you're all going to be exposed to it, but it's like that side of things is more important. Um, but that being said, if there is a heavy metals accumulated in the tissues, it's more of the deficiencies or the high levels of the minerals that accumulate because of those then heavy metals that are accumulating in the tissues. Like you can get extremely high levels of zinc that will accumulate as a protective measure for like mercury in the
mhm,
body. And mercury is the common one just because a lot of people have like old fillings or vaccinations or whatever else that they're exposed to. And that obviously can create issues because it causes more of you'll have zinc deficiency symptoms, even though the zinc is like super high. Or if it's super high in the tissues, you might actually have low blood zinc where you're not like using any of it. And so it's the utilization of some of the minerals that are crucial for your body to be using that kind of get disrupted when there's heavy metals in there. So like symptoms could be all over, but parasites too, which is like a huge popular topic, are huge with heavy metals. And so
mm,
that's more of an issue when there's heavy metals or people who have a lot of candida and yeast overgrowth problems um, tend to not be able to get rid of those infections when there's a lot of heavy metals present. And so kind of issues with that. And there's, like uranium is a common one, mercury, aluminum. Those are kind of like the top three I typically see. And I don't know if I could say that I've done enough of the cross correlation of what the most common symptoms are for
mm.
them. I mean, there's profiles out there, but I feel like the people I work with are experiencing a lot of the stuff. So I'm not really quite sure.
What
But I
is
do
it?
know
Yeah.
once I put them on certain binders, like certain binders will pull out certain metals. It just depends on which one. Then they do come out because I do retests and you can see it, like they're gone. So
No, that was one of my other follow-up questions. So you mentioned retesting.
mhm.
How long, again, on average, right? Like,
Yeah.
does a protocol look if they had some dysfunction there or some heavy metals causing some issues? How long does it look, with a protocol? And then when does retesting generally take place from that standpoint, just to kind of make sure everything's
Yeah.
good to go?
It really depends on what else they have going on. Like you have someone who has a lot of gut issues and they're having a hard time with digestive liver dysfunction or like bile flow. You want to make sure that's flowing well before you just start putting them on a bunch of binders because
Mhm.
this is like what bothers me too with the whole like parasite thing that's going around is like they want to put all these people on like these antimicrobials and parasite blends when these people have like the worst digestive function and then they're just like recirculating toxins in their body and I'm like that's like also not good because as you know like a lot of people aren't methylating correctly or like getting rid of the stuff when they should be and they're not
Yeah.
hydrated and so it's just like stuck in their body. And so I think that's an important part too. So like I'll always make sure that the digestive support I'm giving is getting them more regular for a period of time first before I will introduce certain binders. It just depends on the person. Like if you just someone came to me and they weren't having a lot of symptoms and they have normal digestive function and they're like, let's do a hair analysis test. I find heavy metals, I'd probably put them on a binder right away and just pull it out and then try to balance their mineral profile. And then it's like you want them to so when I do a hair test, it's like a 3-month snapshot. So you're kind
Mhm.
of seeing what's in the tissues like the last 3 months. So usually I'll give somebody at least 3 months on a protocol to get their system kind of like balanced. And that's pretty normal for like if you have a lower level of mercury, whatever, a 12-week protocol on whatever is usually enough time to pull it out. Um, and it's, there's not a lot to do with that, but
So, and it sounds like with the hydration corrections, it's really focused on the things that are causing the lower levels of hydration. Do you do anything with fluid intake in conjunction with that? Like, hey, based on your size, your activity level, this is what you need as well, or these are the electrolytes you need, or is it just
yeah.
at first you're just solely focused on getting the binders and getting the junk out?
Yeah. And I mean, it still goes deeper than this because like if someone's on a medication, then sometimes it's a medication that's driving the pituitary or whatever's going on to like accumulate that. So then that's a whole nother thing to deal with. But I also do oat testing. So we're
Mm.
testing metabolites. So like, do you have certain low amino acid profiles? I will test people who have extremely low hydrochloric acid and stomach acid who can't digest protein and therefore they're like over fermenting protein in their body. Then they stop eating protein because they feel like crap when they eat protein. And so then I do an oat test and they're super low in like their entire amino acid profile because of that. And you can just get confirmation through different ways of testing if you're doing a lot of it at once. If you have low amino acid profile, a lot of these are precursors to dopamine and serotonin production in the brain. And this is what is allowing the brain to work. And so it's like, what do you do first? Again, it points back to like the patient's symptoms, their health history, what medications they're on, what supplements they're taking, how long have you taken this? How long have your symptoms been going on? And so it just becomes more about like understanding what's triggering what. But a lot of times if you get their stomach acid production up, you're getting their protein intake up, they start eating more, you're allowing for that to come up for long enough. You might give certain protocol of certain amino acids or certain things for a short time to like drive that up and then hope the system. But it's kind of this like checks and balances sort of thing. And this is where like client check-ins and being on point with all the protocols and that stuff matters because that's like for us to do our job correctly. It's like that's very important for assessment purposes and just like really refining some of that stuff. And I think that's almost like the hardest part.
Yeah, I'm curious with that. What does the check-in look like? Like, what are some? I'm sure there's a lot to unpack there, but what are some of the key hot topics or big bullet points you're trying to pull out?
Yeah, I'll change some of the check-in criteria depending on what part of the protocols they're on. But I will have like big like Google spreadsheets, and I'll have certain questions that they got to go in every day and answer and put down. And it might be, if I just start them on some digestive support, did you experience any burning today after you ate? How are your bowel movements? Did you see any floating in your stools? Was there any undigested food in your stools? How much water did you get in today? Like for women, what day of your cycle are you on? So there might be like specific daily questions that are specific to some of the protocols that we're on and things we're experiencing. So I know if something needs to go up or down. And then at the end of the week, they'll have certain questions that they answer for me that are like kind of just giving me an overall sort of picture on the week. So I may have a check-in call with somebody once or twice a month to like go over even more details. But then for them to be able to do that, and at least if I'm not going over it every day, which I don't, I can look back at the trends and see when I changed something. How did you feel? What were you experiencing? You know, to what degree? And I won't do it that crazy the entire time that they're working with me, but with some of this stuff, when it's more specific, I will. Yeah.
No, that's it sounds very high touch. So they're reporting, you were mentioning, pretty much daily. So a lot of just how they're feeling, how they're adjusting, and then it progresses over time, I would imagine. Is there any interplay early on, or is there walking through the protocols with differences in nutrition, as well as maybe some form of supplementation or other
Yeah.
interventions with nutrition and with training? What does that
Yeah.
look like in some of those situations?
Yeah. I mean, I do like the consulting side. I have the coaching side, and then I have like comprehensive coaching. So if you're somebody who's got like a lot of stuff up front, then you're committing to a long period of time with me, because I'm not doing this amount of testing and sending you off. Like, it's a lot of upfront work. You're going to commit to the process. This is how we're doing it, whatever. People who do consulting will do the testing with me. It's an educational session. I may make recommendations for them for maybe the first stage of healing, but I won't give them every stage because it has to be monitored. And I don't feel good with that. And some people need to go slower or faster. So a lot of times when people come and do the consulting stuff with me, I don't need you to commit to coaching with me. But by the time they understand everything that's going on and the complexity of it, they decide to sign on to do some coaching with me, and I have different options for that. And the detailedness of that coaching depends on how much hands-on the client needs. I may say, hey, this is your only option with something like this. We have to track this, or I won't be able to do my job correctly. So this is the option. At some point, we can go down to this where we're doing less and we're only talking once a month or whatever. But it allows them to just get more of that hands-on or whatever. But again, like, people can come do testing with me and take the education, learn what's going on, and decide not to do it. But 99% of people don't do that. Or they may just sign on from the beginning and say, yeah, I know that I want to do this, and I already know there's a lot of stuff going on. So, but yeah, it'll look different depending on what people have going on, and then I'll make a recommendation for that.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're dealing a lot with more complex cases and people, I would imagine, that maybe have tried other approaches, but just they weren't deep enough for them. And then you have to really kind of dive into the details to kind of get that solution there. Um, yeah, are there any kind of commonalities you see in people that are coming to see you? Maybe is it men, women, certain age group, and then certain? I know
Yeah.
there's a lot of mixture, but maybe some certain symptomology that is coming your way.
Yeah. I would say a lot of people have a lot of like bloating and discomfort. They're having maybe issues also losing weight, or a lot of inflammation. Um, and I don't like, even if someone comes to me, because one of my most popular is just doing like comprehensive blood work, and people like love blood work, but I think it's because they're most comfortable with that. And I might do kind of like a call, and this is like what they want to do. And I'll be like, likely there's some other stuff we won't be able to see from this, but I don't have any problem running this blood work for you and doing a consult with you. And then when we go over it, I can go over this with you and say, this is what I'm seeing, but this is what we don't know from this lab work, and sometimes people want to do further testing, and sometimes they don't. and that's fine. And I can make recommendations based on this, but do we know if that will work or not, or if it's gonna, you know what I mean? And so I used to see certain digestive things just through blood work, and then I would recommend maybe like a really easy sort of digestive blend that most people might do well with, and some people feel better from it, and it might not be exactly what they need or fix the whole issue, but they're getting some relief from it. And so so it just becomes hard to want to do just that only, without helping people. But again, sometimes it's like, oh, I just want to lose weight, or I just want to whatever, and then I'm like, okay, well, do you have any other symptoms? No. Well, then you start asking them questions, and they're like, yeah, like I poop once a week, or like I'm always bloated after I eat and whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, you just want to do blood work, but you have like a lot of other stuff going on. So I think the main thing for me is just education. And that's why I like doing podcasts. Like YouTube reels are hard, because like, how do you do a clip this big and explain the comprehensiveness in what you do? So it's like, you kind of just have to put a little bit of everything out and hope people are like interested enough to talk to you. And then you can like really explain to them. Um, but yeah, I think it's the education piece, and that's why once someone even does one or two tests with you, and you can expand their knowledge base and help them understand why and what else, then they're willing to invest in themselves on a deeper level, because it's scary to put down a lot of money, and a lot of people have spent a lot of money on health and wellness stuff where they
Right.
don't want to just blow more because that's what they think they're doing.
Right. They seem
Which
kind of
I'm sure you
defeated
guys
with
see
it.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned education resources, things like that. You have like some free resources out there for people. If I recall correctly, do you have like an ebook or different guides that
Yeah.
you provide for people? Can you talk a little bit about that, just for as people are listening to this and they want to kind of learn more about what you do?
Yeah. Yeah, I do have a free ebook offered, and it's on my Instagram, my link tree. There's a link that you can click. And so once you just get on the email list, it goes right into your email. And it's like a 10-page ebook. And it just breaks down kind of what I call like the 4 pillars. Um, a lot of the things that I talked about today, the hormone piece, the mineral balance, the gut health, why they're each individually important and how that affects you, but then how they all kind of work together. And so I think it's just like a good education tool to help people understand, maybe what they're missing in trying to get there. And I would say most people are either bloated or they just can't lose weight, and that's most people's complaint. They don't feel, or their energy is low, and so I think to understand, what that means, um, is helpful, and that's why I did it, is just to help people kind of just learn, at a deeper level. And then I did write a second ebook that's like 60 pages that goes into more of like the mindset and the goal setting when it comes to like healing at a deeper level and how to maybe process things differently. And that one's a paid one, but it's not very expensive. But then it just takes all that a step. Like, do you like what you read? Okay, take it a step further. Here's a deeper dive into that gives you even more information. And so that's what that book is.
Well, no, I think it's really helpful though, because a lot of people feel like, oh, it's just me, and like there's no answers. Like there's no, I'm just going to be this way, and I'm just going to have these menstrual issues, or I'm just going to have this weight gain issue or this energy issue. And it's like, we got to start at ground level. You have some metabolic dysfunction, maybe some traumatic events, maybe some exposure to things you didn't realize that have built up over time. And now it's going to take
Yes.
not quite as long to unpack in many cases, but it's going to take some time and some commitment to work through that. But just, it's interesting. And I'm sure, I'm interested if you see this as well, but how people, even their demeanor when they're talking about their struggles with weight loss or with, bloatedness and energy, they just have this defeated posture, like they're a failure and it's all them. And it's like, well, I mean, there's some things maybe you could have controlled, maybe, but did you have, it's not like you had some malicious intent on yourself to like do this. So stop beating
Yeah.
yourself up, because not only physiologically the things going wrong, mentally, like they're pretty beat up. And I'm just curious
Yeah.
to what is the mindset of clients when they come into you? And is that something that
Oh
you
yeah.
you see a lot of?
And I try to talk a lot about that stuff, but I don't even have like, we don't have the time to sit and like coach people on the mental side. And that's like key. But I always tell people sometimes the physical stuff can like obviously shift your mental thing and vice versa. But a lot of it, like you said, is trauma or things that you've believed the whole time. And so it's like, hey, sometimes when you work in the physical, it can release some of that stuff. But that's also why people have a hard time healing the physical, is because that those blocks come up and then they let it take over and then they quit again. And so you could work on one side or the other, or you could work on them together, and that's going to make you the most successful. But even something as simple as like people who have suffered from eating disorders their entire life likely have extreme nutritional deficiencies and oftentimes have a thyroid imbalance. If you're not getting, like binge eating stuff, like I did it after college and stuff, it's like you're having absorption issues. Your body is not at a cellular level even absorbing any of the energy. So you're trying to like fuel something that your body isn't getting: serotonin, dopamine, B vitamins, energy, glucose. You have a bigger pool to pick from when you're eating a lot more food and your body starts craving it, but now you're feeding bacteria and all this other stuff. And it's a vicious cycle. And it's self-defeating because people believe that they're weak.
Hmm.
And of course, there is a certain amount of discipline, because at some point you have to push through it. It's not just going to go away. But
Right.
to understand what is the driving force behind some of these things that are contributing to you being in that cycle is empowering, and it is important for people to understand. And it can be the thing that helps them to push through, because they feel like there's a way to get out of it. And I think when they've done enough of those cycles that they can't get out of, it feels like, what's the point in trying again? And I think
Right.
eating disorders or obesity or whatever, and that's the hardest part.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with, I think the testing, it's going to be more than what they're used to when they go to their GP for a physical or an annual checkup. But I think the people that do make the commitment, there's a little bit of hope when they come out of that, because
Yeah.
they're like, oh, that makes sense. And the way you've articulated it even today, where this causes this, causes this, causes this. You mentioned on your intake, you're feeling this way. And then I see this makes total sense to me. So
Yeah.
I think it kind of, have you noticed a little change in their approach and just a little bit of hope at the end of some of those reviews when
Yeah.
you're working with someone?
But that's why I think the coaching is helpful, because a lot of people need that like reiterating, because it does get tough at certain points. And it's like, this is part of it. Sometimes it feels worse before it gets better. And like they need that assurance a little bit. I mean, how do you guys do your onboarding, and how do you, work with the people that you work with?
Yeah, it's similar. It's so we do a lot of partnerships with different coaches and things,
Okay.
because ours is pretty heavy on the medical side.
Yeah.
And then we'll still offer like lifestyle recommendations, some nutrition support, and then if and when needed, the right pharmacology. But we try to look at what's a minimal effective dose versus, like I was saying earlier, like versus like a thing. We're trying to
Yeah.
figure out, why do you need that thing? And then if you still need it, great, we can do that. But let's fix it long term for you and be your long term partner. And then we will refer out to other coaches to say, hey, you need more help. Like
Yeah.
we're doing this and this is great, and we're going to give you these tips and stuff. But it just seems like you're progressing well. But I think you could be progressing faster. And if you have the resources and the commitment level to work with somebody a little bit more, this is a
Hmm.
great investment, because then you're going to have the education for the rest of your life. Not only are you going to feel so much better, so much faster, but you're going to have the knowledge now, the working knowledge, because a lot of good coaches that are putting comprehensive plans together, right? You're going to walk away with all that information that you learned about your body, yourself, how it affects you. And now you have answers. So I think
Yeah.
that's a really, um, just a really cool kind of process to see from that
Yeah.
standpoint.
Well, I think what's hard is it's like people get scammed on paying a lot of money for certain things, and people might not have the best intentions or whatever. Um, but also people want to pay the cheapest amount, but want to get the best results. And you might be able to do that for like a short term
Right.
result. But at the same time, like if you aren't paying me enough, you're not going to get enough touches.
Right.
And when you try to do things at a less rate or doing less with people, then they're not getting the results either. And it's one of those things where you don't want to charge a ton for people, but you have to for your
For your
time
time.
if you're doing that much work, because you don't just get to send me your results every week and have me remember all of that stuff. I'm going back to refer to all of your lab work, all of your notes, all of your files every time I go and look at that sheet, which is my time analyzing the stuff. What dosing do we need to have? You need this new supplement. Here, I'm going to go send it to you. It's like, it's a lot of of work to stay on top of somebody's symptoms if you want them to actually get better and progress. And so if you're not getting that with somebody that's that in depth with your stuff, I mean, certain hormone replacement stuff isn't needed or necessary to be doing, that much of a whatever. But it's like people aren't going to get the results and you're not going to get the clients anyways. And so like, it's like, hey, this is my amount. But once you see the value and understand how much we're working together, whatever, like you don't have a problem. But you get to a point where it's like, you are going to pay this much, because if you don't, I'm not going to do a good job. And then, you know what I mean?
Well, it's
So,
kind of similar. That's what I say. Like, I have a lot of friends that will ask me, um, but I have very, very fortunate. I have people a lot very hands-on, very passionate about these subjects, and a medical team that's fantastic. And but still they'll still ask me like, well, how much for this test or how much for that test? I'm like, testing is as cliche as it's going to sound. It's you pay for what you get. I'm like, there's
yeah,
really not a massive markup. It's pretty public, the pricing for these things, and they're dictated by companies that own these tests. And
yeah,
like you could do this test, this says this test. And I just try to tell them like, listen, based on this and this, I think you should do this. Or, hey, you're younger, pretty healthy, not really a lot of family history of
right,
X, Y, and Z. You could do the big thing, the big awesome panel, and that would be great. But if you don't have the resources, you could do this one,
yeah,
and I think we can get a lot. And if we find some underlying issues in that, it'll just be prepared that we may need to do more testing. That's
right,
fine. Or just rip the Band-Aid, make the commitment now. It just really just depends on the person. But I think it's important, as you mentioned, like for people to approach some of this with, it is different. It's not not there's anything wrong with this. I'm sure it helps a lot of people, but it isn't a training app or a cookie cutter / templated some formulas and spits out a meal plan, which again, is it better than what most people are doing? Probably,
yeah,
but it's a much more in-depth and thorough approach, which requires not only your time, but all your time prior, all the research, all the stuff you dive into leading up to this point. And I think a lot of people forget that. Like, hey, I went to school for this long. I did a 2-year fellowship in this. I did this. And it's like, that's what they're not seeing. And so I think it's
yeah,
good though that there are service providers like yourself. There are coaches that are not, as I said earlier, like resting on, look at what I did on stage, look at my physique, listen to me, do exactly what I did.
right.
Not the case. Like, it's very individualized, comprehensive from there. Um, but with that, I did want to ask about, like, what do you have coming up? Are there any programs, seminars, products? Like, what do you kind of have in the works, or can you tell people a little bit about what it's, what is step one to work with you?
Yeah,
I guess whatever you have going on, like, love to hear about
yeah.
that.
If someone's really interested in working with me and has a lot of stuff going on, I do offer a free call to go over that. If they're that they know enough of what I do at that point, I have no problem doing that, because I don't just pitch people the biggest package off the bat. I really want to give people like what I feel like they need to be doing. And then again, help them build the value and understand why it would be important for them to do certain things. And I feel like that helps them feel more comfortable. And then from there, I would just say, hey, based on this test that said that this is X amount, you could commit to this upfront, or we could start with the consulting part and you could decide to, do more from there, whatever. But I mean, the coach, that's the coaching side. Typically it's easiest to email me. I have people DM me and send whatever, but I usually will just send them over to that and shoot a couple of emails back and forth and then get on a phone call with them. And then I'll walk them through the process that way. So yeah,
Well,
that's kind of the,
I was going to mention too, just you were talking about consulting. I think, and I'm curious, I think I understand how you do it, because I'll just talk it back of, like, I
Mhm.
have a couple friends that do it, and it seems to be taking off more and more. Right. I have a friend who's very, very good at blood work, and she gets a lot of women that are at a clinic or whatever. And again, I think the doctors probably have the best of intentions, but maybe just don't have the passion that she has, where she just
Yeah.
really goes down the rabbit hole. And then she'll do a nice extensive write-up on their labs and send it back and be like, hey, if you want to coach with me, cool, but here you go. Here's some places I like to send people that I trust. Don't have to use them, but here's your deal. And then a lot of them will take it back to their doc and say, hey, and of course, if it's an egotistical doc, it's like, well, they're not a doctor, but most of the science is sound, like, because I've seen
Yeah.
some of her write-ups, but I'm curious, is that kind of a similar process when you do consulting? Like, is it a write-up of the results? Is it lifestyle?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
I mean, and I do all my lab testing. So like I'm the one ordering all the things. So if someone comes to me and they're like, "Hey, I had some blood work done. My doctor said everything's good." I'll be like, "Show me," because I don't feel like they probably ran much.
Right.
Um, and if they did, and I see something on there, I'll say, "Well, if we can do a call, and I'll charge you X amount to go over it with them." And then yeah, I do a post consultation write up where it's like flagged findings, recommendations. For the post consult, or I might recommend further testing or specific supplements or whatever. But the majority of people are coming to me to do the testing. And then they might say, I want to do blood work, say what's going on. Then I'll say, I think you should also do this, and this is why. And they might do it or maybe not. But that's kind of how I'll do it is I'll do the recommendations for the testing based on that. So I usually charge the consult with the blood work together as one.
Mhm.
I don't ever do any testing and just let people do it. I may do that with blood work if someone just needs a resource, but for the most part, like all of my stuff is packaged with me reading it. Um, and that's like going extremely in depth and giving them separate write-ups for what this means at like a overarching level, what specific values mean, especially in the GI test. Like it's so, detailed that I'll
Yeah.
go through and break down certain things and whatever. And so, yeah, they'll always get that write up. They'll always get the recommendations after. Um, and again, a lot of people they take it and they do what they want with it. But a lot of people end up wanting to work through it with me after, and then they kind of jump into doing more of the walkthrough process to like kind of work through those issues.
Yeah, I mean, once you have the write-up and it's like, okay, she knows what she's talking about, and
Yeah.
now I just have to follow her advice and sign up for her services, and I can correct some of this. Like, okay, now I have a step in the right direction to finding some solutions. I have some answers of what was wrong, and now I need to go get the solutions, which is
Yeah.
that second step in the process. So
Yeah. Well, and I did a lot of research on other practitioners and stuff who were doing certain things, and some of them charge way more and some of them charge way less, but they would give like they'd have a couple of them had like example things on their sites of what they gave, and I was like, this isn't really like helping anyone. They don't know what to do with this even or whatever. So I kind of was like, I want to make this experience better or make it help more. And so I kind of catered the way that I do my stuff a little bit differently after. And you can charge less and not do as much work on the back end, giving people the breakdown, but it's not helping people. So, like,
right.
you know what I mean? I think it just, for me, that's important.
Yeah, there's people that specialize in everything, and there's different levels of service in every industry, and it just yours is going to be at that higher touch and more detailed, and which is kind of, and again, just one of the reasons why we wanted to reach out to you and bring you on today for our audience, is kind of walk through some of these topics that are complex
Yeah.
and are tough to unpack, but I think, so people can walk away with a little bit of hope to say, okay, I have some options, whether I
Okay.
want to move forward with those options or not, at least I
Right.
know there's some things out there. It's not always just I went to this one doc or this one coach or this one thing, and that's the
Yeah.
way they all work. There's differences and nuances to every approach.
Yeah. I think it's why I like talking about the competing stuff less, first of all, because I retired over 10 years ago.
Right.
But a lot of people just saw me as somebody who only worked with these athletes and those kind of people. And I'm like, no, I actually like working through some of the other stuff. And it's complicated in different ways. It's fun to have a mix, but I do work with a lot of different kinds of cases, and everything becomes a whole different puzzle to solve. And that's how I have learned different aspects of the body and what is tying together, because you see these patterns over time. So it's men with hormone issues, or I even get men who were in the bodybuilding industry for a long time who are just like shooting themselves up with like all the things that don't know what they're doing, and now they are crashing and they can't figure out and they're willing to do anything. And I'm like, you're going to listen to everything I say then,
Right.
and so like I fixed a lot of mistakes that other coaches have made on that side of things.
Right.
But then it's like, cancer, autoimmune conditions, major hormonal imbalances, digestive dysfunction. Like you want to lose weight, but you also want to feel better, but you whatever, or maybe you're undernourished and you're super underweight, or you have an eating disorder, or I mean, really truly, when you're doing this kind of work at this level, you can really work with anyone who's experiencing anything. And there are very complex situations. I work with kids. I worked with like you name it. It's kind of everything. And it for me, it's fun. And I will say if I don't know something, but I'm also like a perfectionist and I want to know more. And so I'm the person who will like continue to dive and learn as I go along. So it'll continue to be more. And I'm connected to some doctors all over the world that I'm doing a lot of continuing education with now and some consulting stuff with. And so it's like I'm constantly learning from people who are way better than what I am at things. And it's
Sure.
fun to be pushed in that way. And it's, I'm sure for you doing this, which I think is amazing, to be constantly talking to other people and learning new things and getting different ideas. And I love doing the podcast for that reason, because I like learn something from everybody.
Yeah, and it's a lot of these testing services too, right? Like they'll offer, extra consults and stuff, and it's just you have to have a passion for it, because you're gonna put the time in, and more than the time, I think the mental energy to really dive in and figure that out. Like I was, even just so pumped. I had a family member that I was helping, and some of their protocol was just working, and I was like, oh, thank you, because there was like 2 or 3 protocols, some of it early on that was just figuring things out, and then some of it prior to working, to reaching out to me, and it was just in our team, and it was just like, yes. So you kind of get that, also that like cool,
Yeah.
that rush, that feeling of like, all right, we're making progress, we got some things
Yeah.
going. So I'm sure that's rewarding for you as well, as you kind of help people see the light at the end of the tunnel as they're working through this.
Yeah. I mean, but then you are the go-to person for all of your family and friends, and it can be fun, but then it's like, oh my God, like there's no boundaries there then. And it's like exhausting. Like literally my entire family like does testing and they're texting me all. I'm like, I don't even give my clients my phone number. Like you guys aren't allowed to just blow me up all the time, you know?
Yeah, we do, as I was mentioning, like we do some partnerships with different, like MMA, jiu-jitsu academies, and then we have like different coaching things and all that we do. But it's like a lot of the owners that get to know me, and then they're reaching out. I'm like, listen, so and so on my team is much better than me. Like I'm doing this, I'm doing like, I appreciate it, but
Yeah.
they and I get it. It's I'm honored that they think that, I have the solution. I'm like, so and so spent 4 hours with you. Like I'll take
Right.
a look at with their protocol, just because of our relationship, but you're
Right.
in good hands. Like it's all
Yeah.
good. Trust me. So I think, yeah. So I guess I get where you're coming from with that, because it's, I have to sometimes just, it's a balance. You don't want them to feel like you're blowing them off. Cause I'm not, I'm genuinely not. I'm like, no, I'm being
Yeah.
serious. Like this person knows your case better than I do. I'm going to need for me to answer that one question, I would need maybe 2 or 3 questions. I'm going to need like an hour of someone giving
Right.
me the lowdown of what specifically is going on, because I don't want to misspeak. This isn't a Instagram reel or a TikTok. Like this is, deep,
Yeah.
comprehensive stuff we're unpacking here. So
Well, and I think like for me, I think that's the biggest issue on this side of the industry is like if you are pushing to try to make money at a high level, then you really downgrade the effectiveness of whatever it is that you're promoting, because you can't give all those questionnaires, you can't understand it. And that's why like certain products and things that are being promoted like are not the best thing for everybody to be taking, and can make things way worse, And so it's I think that's hard, as a lot of people trust the ads and the everybody, and then they have a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to spending more money on supplements with somebody who's actually telling them what to take for the right reasons. Or it's hard to see the more you learn stuff, the promoting of things.
yeah, no. And speaking of promoting, you were gracious enough to give us all this time and information. So I'm curious, you mentioned email. For the viewers out there, we're going to have all this in the show notes as well, and a bunch of information, of how to contact you. We'll definitely put out there for everybody. But can you tell a little bit about where people can find you and contact you with some of your information?
Yeah. Well, my website is spectrumwellness.biz, B-I-Z. So I do have a contact form on there. I do have some information. I'm like constantly trying to redo the way I wanted to redo my website, but that is one of the resources and ways to get a hold of me and kind of see some of that. I have a Linktree link in my bio, which I can give you that as well, in my Instagram. And that has like all of my links for TikTok, Instagram. I have a YouTube channel, which I do have a lot of info on. I have my free ebook link that's as well on there as well, if you want to get a hold of that. And then my emails also through all that. But Casie@spectrumwellness.biz is my email, and that's on my website. It's kind of in all of my contact stuff. So if you do shoot me an email and want to get in touch with me or have questions about like what I offer and how I'm doing some of my things and packaging, likely I don't give people a price point for something when I don't know much about their case, but I can give a range if someone has like a question on something specific. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing these days. I mean, I have certain supplements that I promote, but I don't do a lot of the like promoting unless it's something that like everyone could take without like messing their system up. And yeah, my goal is to just do more education work at a higher level, to open more people's eyes to some of this stuff and get them to like think deeper.
No, I think that's a common thread I see though with some of our guests and you know, with your approach is the integrity, and like you just said, I think that's a big thing because there's a lot of money to be made in a interactive big Instagram account with linking to a direct supplement or whatever the case is. But you're saying, hey, I don't do that, but I do have supplements, but I don't know what you need. So because it's, you know, I just, for people out there, buyer beware type thing, as far as, you know, if you're seeing the flashy new thing or the thing to buy this or buy that, you might just reason for pause. Maybe the person has a good product and a good approach and best of intentions, but I always look for those people that are using research. They're speaking to the nuance. They're not just saying, do this and you'll get this. It's very, hey, you know, this might be you. Here's some things that might be like some of the top researchers that I like to follow and interact with. I just love it because their first answer to every question is, it depends. And they're like, it's funny because I've listened to some of those podcasts where they'll say it 30 times, but at least they're still giving you some info to walk away with, but they're being truthful, like, because it does depend, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and it is individual, but like for me, you know, you don't want to be negative either, where you're like, not everyone should be taking a probiotic, so don't order it. And it's like, take it if you want to take it. Just know if you start feeling worse or whatever, that there's likely something else going on, but don't just start buying everything because someone said that you should take it. Like, learn to start educating yourself on some of that. But I think there's just so much information out there. I think it's confusing, and like, you will always have to spend a certain amount of money. I did too, thousands of dollars through doctors. And I'm hopefully that no one else has to do that to get to the point where I got. But it's not supposed to be easy for you to understand as a normal consumer. It's why people like us get deeper with it and get passionate about it, because it is very complex. And so like, if you've gone through a lot of health issues and you haven't been able to figure it out, it's not abnormal for that to happen, because it's about finding the right people, but also like you're learning your body and the things over time. So just try to continue to log things and make notes over time and learn as much as you can. And you will figure that out over time if you're dedicated to like continuing to try to find it. It's okay if you work to learn to people who didn't figure it out for you, but like, don't, you know, continue to dive deeper.
Well, awesome. No, I really appreciate you coming on. And for everybody out there, all the, you know, our viewers that are checking us out, you know, be sure to put your questions in the comment section, reach out to us. We'll do our best to answer them. And then if I'm not smart enough, I'll ping Casie to see if she can help me out. So definitely thanks so much for watching the episode. And thanks again for joining us and unpacking all this this fun stuff with us today. So
no, it's fun.
A lot of great stuff.
It. Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys. Take care.
Bye.